It's time for Fishing with Son of a Hillbilly featuring Scott Jackson. Get your rods and your reels out as we're going fishing. Them catfish, crappies, and them dang sunfish ain't gonna catch themselves. On this podcast, you will receive the latest gear reviews, interviews with other anglers, great fishing techniques, and much more. Well, what do you know? It's time for a show. Here's Scott Jackson.
Hi, folks, and welcome to Fishing with Son of a Hillbilly. I'm your host, Scott Jackson, and this is episode 5. Today, we're going to talk about the current conditions that are happening probably in your area as well as here. I live in Savage, Minnesota, and it is, of course, late November, or actually late October, beginning in November. Boy, I lose the month here, don't I? Wow. The weather is definitely getting to the cooler side. Leaves have been falling everywhere. I mean, my goodness, it's a ton of leaves. It's a celebration of fall, that's for sure. We have all kinds of weather changes and patterns happening all across the country. There's still areas that are pretty hot. There's a ton of rain falling all over, especially down in the southeast. Boy, I've noticed they have a lot of rain happening due to the hurricanes and the other different weather patterns that have been happening. Out west, of course, it's still warm and dry. They are getting some rain. They did have a little bit of a hurricane backlash that had hit them. Wasn't a direct one, but it was, the remnants of one. Of course, the north here, we're cool. We're going to get a little bit of cold temperature coming from Canada, so it's going to drop down into the 30s. There is the possibility of a little snow mixed in with the rain. I know that New York has beat us with snow, of course, being close to the ocean up there and more water, the large water that is. We have tons of water here in Minnesota, but the larger water, they have got a little snow early, so they have to deal with that. And what that all basically means for you being fall is the fish are going to be slowing down. They're probably going to be moving more towards deeper waters. You will still find some in the shallower waters, depending on the species. Some of them are more colder water, like the walleye. They want to go where that water is colder. Bluegills and other warm water fish will still stay a little more shallow. But they're definitely going to be slowing down this time of year. Their cover and everything is starting to fall apart. That's due to the sun not being out as much. So lily pads, weeds, other stuff, they're all dying off in the lakes. That doesn't mean all the weeds will be gone, but the majority will be gone. So a lot of that cover will be gone, which is a plus for you if you want to be fishing crankbaits and other stuff like that. You won't have as many hang-ups or pulling in a ton of weeds every time you cast out. It'll also open it up for the shore fishermen, who unfortunately won't be, if it's really shallow, they won't be getting a lot of action. They're going to need to cast out a little bit further, hit right on that edge where it starts to get a little deeper, but not too bad. And it depends on what presentation and what type of species that you're going for. Of course, the rivers and stuff will all be good, but the fish are going to be moving towards a deeper channel, especially channel catfish, walleye, other stuff like that, to where they can stay a little warmer. The water's going to be a little warmer in those areas than it will be in the actual shallow ones, unless it's a nice warm day. It won't be any real hot days. But plenty of sunshine will get those fish moving, and you will be able to have some action. This time of year, I like to fish for a lot of sunfish. I've been doing fairly well on them. I've been catching nothing huge by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been catching a number of bluegill, red ears, and other different types of sunnies, and a bunch of perch. The striped perch seem to be hitting fairly well. I've hit some of the local lakes around the area here, like Pryor Lake, Orchard Lake, and Thompson Lake. Thompson Lake's always very good for bluegill. It seems like those things are just totally overpopulated in there. I used a sliding bobber combination. They still had a number of lily pads out there, so I set my sliding bobber to go down to about 3 feet, and I would cast over the lily pads or into the holes around the lily pads, and then the bait would would sink down to the 3-foot level. Okay, so with a sliding bobber combination, what's nice about that is when you cast out, your bait's going to go down to the depth that you set your sliding bobber on. I'm going to put a video up here soon of how to set up a sliding bobber. Very simple, very, very easy to do. But the flexibility with a sliding bobber is nice because, like I say, the bait will go down to what you set it at. And when you start to pull your line in, it pulls the line straight up to the bobber. before it starts going into the weeds. So you have less weeds or chance of weeds hanging up, or lily pads or whatever, by getting that bait or the fish, if you got it, hopefully it's the fish, up all the way to the bobber before you start to reel it in. So that makes it a lot easier in moving your bait around and not having to clean a ton of weeds off of your line. Or, it's really good for an ice fishing situation. It's good for sitting out of a boat and fishing straight off to the side, casting whatever distance you want. Really a handy situation, and I highly recommend using sliding bobbers in a lot of different techniques. Now, for catching the fish, I was using bits of nightcrawler and redworms, and the bluegills were just eating it up. Of course, I still had to deal with the little dinky bluegills. They are definitely bait-stealing little devils, and I just don't care too much for them, but, it's part of the thing. So for every 2 or 3, little dinky bluegills you get, you're going to get a nice-sized bluegill, and you will fill your bucket up with that. When I was fishing for the perch, I was fishing straight on the bottom, and in the area where where the weeds had died off close to the shore, but they still were a little bit more in the depth, because I could cast out about 20, 30 feet and not get any weeds. But if I cast it a little further, I could pull in weeds at that time. So I know that I was fishing close to a swimming area, and they had cleared off quite a bit of the area, and it was all sandy, and the weeds had grown around that outside edge of that area. So I kind of figured the fish would be sitting right on the edge of that weed bed. The fishing area has been closed down the swimming area had been closed down for well over a month, and that left it so that it was wide open for fishing, and I didn't have to worry about it. So I would fish that area, so it gave me a sandy area where I definitely was seeing lots of bait fish moving around there. The seagulls were diving, there were coots and other fish-eating birds that were all in that area, so I know they were feeding on some of the small minnows and stuff. I didn't have any minnows, but I had some nice big fat night crawlers, so I did them with my sliding rig technique, and I hooked them once through the nose, cast it out there right along those edge, so I'd made sure I didn't hit those weeds, and bam, I was getting those perch. They were, about 11-inch perch, 12-inch perch, so they were pretty good-sized perch. And, filling up my limit was no problem. I'd sit out there, it's a nice windy day, had lots of fun watching what was going on to see how many people were brave enough to go out on the lake. It wasn't so bad for the boats to get out there because it wasn't that big of a chop, but the wind was definitely biting. I was definitely bundled up to do my fishing, and rarely do I let the weather bother me too much, but it was definitely a bit chilly out there. I watched a bunch of sheriff's patrols out there. They were doing some different programs and stuff, rescue or routing people around, that type of stuff, and they were definitely practicing. And this was just before they pulled all the docks in. I was there just a few days ago and noticed they had pulled all the docks up in the area. So your fishing pier was gone. And so were the docks for the boats to hook up to. They were all up on the bank area. So that means they're definitely getting prepped for the frigid season we're going to have here in the winter. And I'm looking forward to that, to try some ice fishing out here. So back to the area. I also tried down along the river. I didn't get much action on catfish, but boy, did I clean up on silver drum. My goodness, a lot of people really put down silver drum. I don't. It's another one of those fish you can fill your freezer up with, and in this state, you can catch as many of those freaking things as you want. And they are actually related to the red drum, so the fish flavor is actually pretty good on those fish. I wasn't catching any small ones. I was actually catching them in a 2-pound to 3-pound category, so they were really good size for making good fillets. And when you get yourself a dozen of those things in your freezer, you've got yourself some fish. Catch them on a nice, medium action type pole, medium to medium light, a 6-pound test, a sliding rig. Now, in the river, of course, you have to use a fairly heavy sinker, and I prefer the no-flip sinkers. So doing that is your best presentation you can do. I always put like an 18 to 24-inch leader on there, a nice circle hook, and a night crawler. Now, when I'm talking circle hook, I'm talking the smaller ones. I'm not talking about the large catfish hooks. I'm talking about one that's going to fit into a drum's mouth or a carp's mouth or a smaller catfish. I'm fishing for whatever's going to hit the hook. If I use too big of a bait presentation, I might be catching a big one, but I'm not going to be catching all those small ones, and I want to fill my freezer up with a bunch of smaller ones. And the main reason for that is I don't want to have to worry about getting a lot of the pollutants and stuff that might be in the larger fish. If I catch a 25 or 30 pound fish, I'm not eating that fish. I'm going to take pictures of it. I'm going to smile and brag like crazy, but that fish is going back in the lake. That fish has been eating all kinds of stuff for many, many years. If it's a bottom feeding fish, it's going to be picking up all kinds of stuff, picking up mercury, picking up other different pollutants. And also, he's made it that long. That guy deserves to get back in that water again. So I'm going to go for those little younger, crazier fish, those teenage fish, so to speak. And those really fill up my fish bags much better. And that's what I highly recommend other people. If they're going to keep fish to eat, go for the middle-sized ones. Release all those big babies. Have fun catching them, though. Boy, they're a blast to catch, and I really enjoy catching a big fish. Nothing's better than fighting one on a light to a ultralight type of outfit if you're catching a really big one, or if you need the gear, if you're catching those tackle-busting big catfish or carp, muskies, walleye, or whatever it is, use your bigger rigs, the medium-heavy to heavy-action rods, and they'll still give you a heck of a fight. Okay, so back to fishing for species. I like going for the smaller panfish this time of year. Soon I'll be fishing more for, the bass and see if I can pick up some northern pike and walleye once the lakes freeze over. But right now, in the lakes that I have in this area, and I know the species, the best thing for me to fish for will be the panfish. And I recommend using, again, like I said earlier, night crawlers, red worms. You can use wax worms as well. Any of that live bait will work very well for you. Use a small Aberdeen hook. Use light line. I'd recommend a sliding bobber if you're using a bobber rig situation. Or go straight to the bottom with either a sliding rig or just a straight split shot. You'll do really well with that. Just depends on how far you have to cast out. If you have to cast a distance, you might as well be using that sliding bobber and put it down to the depth that you want. And if you're not fishing on the bottom, you have that bait hanging up a little bit. There could be a lot of debris on the bottom from all the dying plants right now. So if it's floating right above that, the fish will see it a little bit better. And we're talking panfish now, Panfish are a little bit more bold, a little bit more crazy, and are more apt to hit your hook than the more warier fish at this time. And if you're looking to fill up your bucket, that's what I'd go for right now. Like I say, presentation, slow is a good way to do it right now. If you want to fish spinner baits or something else like that, fine. I know you'll probably pick up some bass, you'll probably pick up some northern pike. But if you're going for the numbers and you want that sheer numbers, go with a live bait right now. That's what I would do, especially if you're fishing from the shore. If you're fishing from a boat, that's going to open up a lot more situation for you. You have a depth finder, of course, fish finder. You can tell where the fish are at, and then you can adjust your presentation for that. Different jigs would work good in that situation. And I like using a jig for fishing leeches. I like using a jig for fishing night crawlers, minnows, other stuff, because it puts the bait in the right direction. If you're just hanging a hook straight down for a leech or a minnow, and you haven't hooked that minnow through the back and you're hooking it through the nose, it's going to hang funny. That hook's going to hang straight down, but with a jig, it's going to put that thing out at a 90-degree angle, especially if you're fishing straight down or pulling in slowly, so the bait will trail behind in a more natural manner. So that's a really good way to present those baits. And especially if you're fishing from a boat, now you could fish with a jig from the shore. I'm not saying you can't. And I've done it many times. I caught lots of crappies that way, using a jig with a soft-bodied grub, and that would work good this time of year too. Fish it slowly. You don't want to go fast at all, but you got to realize you're not going to get a lot of distance. So if you're in a boat, it's going to be a better situation for you to where you can move to the areas that you know where the fish are going to be at. You can swing over that area with your depth finder and see if there's any fish showing up on the meters and go from there. I was talking about fishing. I usually fish from the shore, but I am going to be a kayak fisherman here soon. Just getting myself all set up. I've got a deal worked with a guy, and you know how I've talked about getting those deals. Oh, my goodness. Going to be doing a little wheeling, dealing, and trading, and I'm going to pick myself up a Lifetime Sports Fisher kayak. And what I love about this kayak is it will hold 500 pounds of weight. And with me being the petite little guy that I am, I need something that can hold quite a bit of weight. Another thing that scares the living poodles out of me is something that's very, very shaky in the water. and can flip over easy. This thing is 36 inches long or wide and 10 feet long. So we're talking 36 inches with a 14-inch depth of the boat itself. Has 3 seats. It's actually designed to hold 3 people on the boat. I would think only 2.5 myself, 2 adults and maybe a kid. And I don't plan on putting anybody in that boat with me. That's going to be my personal fishing craft. Interesting design for fishing. And I'm going to give some videos and pictures and stuff on my website, www.sonofahillbilly.com. And it's going to show you as I progress what I'm doing to it. I've got myself an Echo 100 depth finder that I'm going to mount on it. I want to put an anchor. I want to put some other places. It already has 3 rod holders, but I'm going to add some additional rod holders. Not that I can't fish with all of them at one time. In this state, you can only use 1 pole at a time, but doesn't say you can't bring extra poles as backups. And what I love to do is to have the different rigs all set up on the different poles. So if I'm fishing with a jig on 1 pole, I can grab that pole, fish with a jig. If I'm fishing live bait on one, I can grab that pole, fish with live bait. If I'm doing a crankbait, spinner bait, whatever, I've got each rod set up for each situation. Makes it a lot easier instead of sitting there and having to re-rig the rig, re-tie on a hook each time, and go through all that rigmarole. When you're out on a boat, especially a kayak and a smaller boat, it's easier to have everything all set up. Doesn't mean I'm not going to lose rigs from time to time. That's part of fishing. You're going to do that. But this will make it so much easier to switch back and forth. So the Lifetime Sport Fisher 10-foot by 36-inch, 500-pound rating kayak. And I'm so looking forward to it. It's definitely designed for fishing. It's got different cup holders in there. I've heard some reviews that the back support isn't the best, so I'm probably going to be adding a different seat to it. But at this time, it only weighs 65 to 75 pounds, depending on who you're talking to, and I should be able to lift that pretty easily. It has only 1 handle on the side, and that, might be a difficulty. I might add another handle myself, but it definitely has a front handle and has a place in the back where they can hook up a trolling motor to it if you want. I do have 2 trolling motors, so that is a possibility. But it comes with 2 paddles, and it should be a nice thing. And this guy that I'm doing the deal with says it's brand new. He never used it. He bought it. It was a impulse buy, and he's just trying to get rid of it. I'll take that any day of the week. I love those impulse buys that other people make. It just benefits me even more. So keep an eye out on my website for that to see how I'm coming along with fishing. And I can tell you a little better with how the fish are hitting in my different areas. Like I say, it's been a long time since I've really had a boat that I've been able to fish, very well with. I had a canoe this past summer. Did pretty good. Oh, I tell you, I definitely cleaned up on the brim with that thing. Caught some nice bass, but never did pick up any northern pike or muskies or walleye even. Basically because I wasn't fishing for them. I was going for the fish I was going to fill up my freezer with, and that's my bluegills and my different types of panfish. Definitely love catching those perch and bluegill and crappie. Really, really something you can put a lot of stuff in your freezer. In this state, they're fairly liberal with those bag limits, and you have to just check in the areas of your state to see, check with your Department of Conservation or whoever it is that they call it in your state to see just exactly what your limits are. And please don't break your limits. I mean, it's that simple. It's not worth it to get busted, and it's good conservation to follow those limits because they put them out there for a reason. They want to keep the fish populations in good check. So why don't you do it yourself? Keep them in good check by following those limits. That's why fish like the carp, the drum, they call them underutilized fish in this area. The panfish, which breed like crazy. Those are all fish that you can catch a lot of. Catfish in this area, except for bullheads, they have a 6 fish limit on these catfish. And that's not too bad. I'd much rather have a larger one, and I know in other states it's much larger. But I'll take 6, and I believe it's 20 on bluegills and 20 on perch. But all those underutilized fish like drum, I'll catch a lot of drum. I'll catch carp. Those fish are definitely in my sights to catch a lot of, even though I haven't caught a single carp since I've been out here in Minnesota. All the other fish are hitting a lot better than those guys are. I know they have some big ones because I've seen them splashing in the water. I definitely want to see if I can catch some nice. Now again, if I catch a 20-pound carp, that baby's going back into the water. I'm not keeping one that large. I'll keep them probably up to 5 or 6 pounds in size, but that's about it. When it comes to walleye out here, I'll probably keep one or two if I catch any, but I'm not really fishing hard for walleye. I know a lot of people love them. They're delicious fish, but you can only keep a certain amount, and I don't want to, take fish away from other people at this time. Especially if I'm fishing to fill up my freezer. Doesn't mean I won't keep one if I catch a nice one, but I'll definitely release the larger ones for sure. And I highly recommend that you guys do it. Overall with my fishing, I probably catch and release 98% of the fish that I catch. It's that simple. If I'm fishing for bass, I'm fishing for other game fish. Most of the time, they're going back in the water, especially bass. If they're pregnant, they're definitely going back into the water. If you've seen any of the videos that I've shot where I've been catching bass, in the 2 to 3 pound range, maybe larger, and every time I turn them loose, especially if they're carrying eggs. I'm not that type of person that's going to keep those fish. I'll wait until later in the summer if I'm going to keep any. By that time, the spawn is over and all the fry are out into the water, and I'll keep some in the teenage range that I'm talking about. But not many. Most of the bass and stuff like that, I just enjoy catching them and turning them loose. But panfish and the other ones I'm talking about, and that's what I highly recommend for you folks. If you're going to be keeping a bunch, they're tasty, they cook up very nice, and you can do a lot of great recipes with them. Okay, so we talked about kayak fishing, we talked about boat fishing, we talked about shore fishing, and this time of year, soon it'll be switching over to ice fishing, and I'll have a whole nother subject that I can talk about. And, for ice fishing, of course, you want to have yourself prepared for that. So start thinking, if you're going to be doing some ice fishing, you're going to need an auger. You're going to need some type of sled, a bucket, or something to sit on. Make sure you have really good gear. I've been ice fishing in Illinois before, and I had one of my friend's uncles out there fishing. And this guy he's hardcore. I mean, he definitely is an outdoorsman and a half. But I do believe he really grossly underestimated what the temperature is going to be like out there. And that poor guy had on one of these old World War II bomber hats. And I'm not talking about, I've got a bomber hat myself, but it's a fur-lined, heavy-duty, really nice bomber hat. This was a thin little burlap type of a thing, or what do you want to call it, tarpaulin or burlap or denim, or it wasn't very thick, let's put it that way. But it had ear flaps, so he thought that was enough. He had them pulled down over his ears. We're out there fishing away, and it is freaking cold out there. We're talking probably, 25, 30 degree below zero wind chill factor. We are not in a tent. We are fishing on open ice in Illinois and flatlands. It's blowing on through. I was dressed up really thick and warm. I had a big hat on. Actually, I had several hats on. And all this poor guy is wearing is this little bomber's hat. Well, he took that bomber's hat off when he got back to the truck, and those ears were purple. They had frozen. So he got himself a bit of frostbite on the tips of his ears. And I don't know if he lost those, but I know that sucker was hurting for sure. So if you're going out ice fishing, make sure you get the proper gear. So you be thinking about that in advance. If you're still out here fishing, remember that water is very cold. And if you fall into that water, you get really wet, you might develop hypothermia quickly. So just keep that in mind. You want to keep yourself nice and warm. Make sure you have your flotation devices with you if you're out in a boat. If you're on the shore, just stay warm. Just put a nice coat on. Take yourself a nice thermos of coffee or some other warm beverage and just sit along and enjoy yourself. And this time of year, my usual rule of thumb is 15 minutes in a location. If I'm not getting hits, I'm going to move. I might extend that to 30 minutes simply because the fish are a bit slower and you may have to do a little bit slower presentation and work the area a little more thoroughly because the fish aren't going to be running as much as they are in the warmer weathers. So you need to set and be a little more patient, and you'll still get your great success. I do want to mention I've just created a new course on fishing, and it has 6.5 hours of video content along with my ebook, Son of a Hillbilly Fishing Guide, and an audio version of my ebook as well, so you can listen to it on your iPod or your other portable device. This course will cover tons of fishing knowledge. I'm going to cover everything from bait presentation and lures and, what type of bait to use, poles, tackle, the whole 9 yards. The course itself will have videos on tackle. It's going to have videos on doing rigs. It's going to have videos on reading lakes, how to be able to tell where the best fishing spots are. I'm covering a lot of different subjects in this course, and I'm offering it at only $20 right now, which is not too bad of a price. It's reasonable enough. Go ahead and take a look at the course, see what you think. Get on out there and catch some fish with that course. Take a look at it. If you have any questions about it, feel free to email me at sonofahillbilly@gmail.com. Again, sonofahillbilly@gmail.com. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. You can also call and leave me a voicemail question at 320-634-6658. Again, 320-364-6658. Feel free to leave me a voicemail, and I'd be happy to answer your question through the podcast. I'll do my best to answer the question for you. If I don't know it, I'll tell you that. I'll be honest, and I will do my best to find the answer either way or give you the right direction of where you need to go. Okay, folks, get out there, do some fishing, enjoy yourself. This is Scott, son of a hillbilly, saying so long for now. Happy trails. We'll talk to you later now. Bye-bye. Well, thank you for listening today, folks. If you want any more information about fishing, gear reviews, outdoor adventures, photography, you name it, just check out my website, www.sonofahillbilly.com, or drop me an email, sonofahillbilly@gmail.com, or you can actually call and leave me a voicemail message. You can call 320-634-6658. Go ahead and leave your voicemail message. I will answer it on this podcast. So until next time, folks, I hope you're out there catching lots of fish, having lots of fun, and a good time. Yee-haw! Scott, son of a hillbilly, saying goodbye for now. See y'all later.